All right, class, this is week 8, week of October the 14th. I'm not sure if my volume is turned up. Give me just a moment, please. It looks as though the VU meter is working. I'll have to make sure that I'm close enough to this microphone for maximum effect. As you will see, we have 3 sessions scheduled for that week of October the 14th. And in the syllabus, I ask you to read any handouts. To this point, I've presented very few, if any, handouts. We may have some before the semester ends. And in the first session, we are scheduled to talk about typical requirements in a theological graduate school course, the course itself. In other words, if you were to take any given course, what would you kind of expect to do in that course? We're talking about the syllabi, and of course, syllabi is the plural form for the word syllabus, and the syllabus is the outline of the course, the schedule of the course and its requirements. And then the usual assignments. And this varies a great deal, depends on the subject matter, the institution, and the professor, of course. But for graduate work, there are some things that are expected across the board. The next session was to be reading and writing assignments, and the third would have to do with exams. And for brevity's sake, as I mentioned in the last sessions, we may have to bunch up some of this material. That's my fault, and I apologize once again for getting so far behind this semester for some reasons beyond my control. It has simply been the time factor. I'll do my best to try to catch up and to spend more time on those matters that I deem to be more important than others. Now, this is important, but you can find material like this or information like this that I'll be talking about for a few moments pretty much in any catalog that you consult from various seminaries and graduate schools. So I'll not need to spend a lot of time on this. So I think what I'll do, instead of having 3 sessions, I'm going to go ahead and have it 1 session. This will be for all 3 sessions. This will just be 1 video for all 3 sessions for the week of October the 14th. Now I'll talk about some typical requirements for a course. In a course, you can expect to do several things. You can expect your professor to give assignments up front. And usually these consist of reading assignments and preparation for writing assignments. Now, the reading assignments may involve quite a bit of reading. Some schools require around 2,000 pages. I would say anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 pages of reading, outside reading. Much of this can be accomplished by reading books in the given subject matter that's being studied. But you could also include pages that are read online and pages that are read in journal articles, in magazines and journal articles. In other words, the emphasis here is upon reading. I think it was the great English poet Alexander Pope who once quipped that reading maketh a full man, but writing maketh an exact man. Again, reading maketh a full man. It makes a man full of information, ideas. Writing makes an exact man. It causes that man to learn to think more precisely, to think more incisively, and to think more cogently and consistently. That's a pretty good quip, and I will repeat that from time to time. So this is why usually instructors will require quite a bit of their students in terms of reading. Now, if you think about it, if the average book in English were written at about anywhere from 250 to 350 pages in length, what are we talking about here? Maybe 5 or 6 or 7 books for the semester? At least 5, maybe a few more. It really would not be a surprise at all to have to read 6 or 7 books for a given class. Some of those books you may purchase and own yourself, and I encourage you, as best as you're able to do financially, to buy your own books and to build up your own library. I would encourage you all students to develop a good working religious library for your own sake. If you even have no office, a church office, for example, in a church building, to store your books, keep them at home. Keep them in a safe place, a safe, dry place. But try to acquire as many useful books as you can get, such as concordances and dictionaries and word study books. Anything that will help you, tools of the trade, we will say, tools of the trade. Anything that will help you in your study of Scripture and in your preparation of sermons and in your continued writing. If you want to write in the field of apologetics, for example, you'll be better able to do that if you have the resources back on your shelves at home or in your study, in your library. So build up your own library. This will help to make you a full man. So you should be reading on your own anyway, without requirements from an instructor for a course. But generally, this is what you're going to expect, a number of different pages to read. Now, I've been looking through catalogs again. Some of these are older. They're dated somewhat, and they come from institutions such as Candler School of Theology, and that is in Atlanta, Georgia. That's in Decatur, part of Atlanta, part of the Emory University system. Fuller Theological Seminary, I mentioned that in one of our previous studies. Reformed Theological Seminary, and if I had to, I could go to some other sources. I have several other sources in my library from different institutions showing what they require. So I've looked at this for quite a while, and I've taken courses, a number myself, so I have kind of an idea of what is usually expected. There is flexibility. The instructor might give more or less in terms of assignments, but generally you can expect, I would say, anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 pages of reading in any graduate course. So keep that in mind. And this will help you a great deal. It isn't enough just to go to class and have the instructor to lecture. Usually what classes will consist of, especially at the master's level and at the MDiv level, the Master of Arts and the Master of Divinity degree, will generally consist of some lecture time. The professor will come in prepared to talk about aspects of the subject. Generally at the front, he will talk about what the course will deal with. He'll look over the syllabus and what the requirements will be for you as a student. And then he will begin to make lectures or present lectures on the subject matter. He will try to impart to you information that he possesses, things that he has studied over the years, things that he has recently prepared in terms of the particular class being taught. And then as he does so, you as a student are expected to have a loose leaf notebook or some way to preserve separate pages of notebook paper and a pen or pencil and be able to sit down and jot down notes during his lecture. I would strongly urge you, jot down notes during the lecture. This is something that by now you should have acquired a skill to be able to take the ideas that are being presented on the fly. In other words, as an instructor is giving a lecture, to derive at any given point in the lecture what in your mind are probably the professor's main points. And just write down one or two words for the entire sentence. You don't have to write the whole sentence. One or two words that will remind you later of what the professor dealt with in that sentence and in that paragraph and in that section of his lecture. You can just jot down like shorthand cryptic notes that later you can expand upon. And as you look at those ideas that you've written down in just small segments, you'll be able to elaborate on them in your own study. Please do a great deal of note taking. You're selling yourself short, and you're not giving yourself all the benefits you can get from graduate work if you don't take notes. So you're normally going to be taking notes in the lectures. Now, some of the lectures also at the graduate level will be unique in that they may allow the students to participate. A student may be able to present a lecture. This can be done on campus, physically, but it can also be done digitally, depending on the software. But there are programs available. I'm sure you young men know how to do that better than do I, where you can have participants at a distance to present segments or portions of a lecture. In other words, if you've gone out and researched an aspect of the subject, your instructor might have you to come in and share your findings with the rest of the class. And you'll begin doing more and more of that since you're preparing yourself to teach. So obviously it's good to let you do some teaching. So this is generally what happens in the lecture segment. Again, reading, 1,500 to 2,000 pages for the average master's level course. Give or take a few pages here and there. And writing. Now, I mentioned that a while ago, but let me explain. Almost always a research paper is required. We call them term papers, papers that are written over the term of the semester. A term paper. And this research paper is a formal paper. And it isn't like just writing a letter to your friend or to your loved one. Research writing is formal in that you must prepare an outline up front. You must know exactly what you want to do. You must limit your thesis. You must concentrate on one aspect of the subject or a few aspects. You can't deal with everything, even in the broad subject that's being considered for the course. And we will talk about that more a little bit later in another session. But Now I'm just introducing what you can expect in the typical graduate level course in a theological school. And there will then be the requirement for your term paper to be turned in a timely fashion. I looked at one of the catalogs that indicated that if a term paper is turned in late, in other words, past the deadline that is indicated in the syllabus, it will not be accepted. That's a little bit draconian or harsh in my estimation. It depends. But generally speaking, that is a good rule. In other words, there ought to be allowances made for some extenuating circumstances. If you're not able to get in a paper on time for hardships, and I'm having to beg your forgiveness for being late and getting these lectures in, so I understand, obviously, I'm not going to be more difficult to deal with than I expect you to be with me, then that's one thing. But if you're just not turning it in out of negligence or not caring, that'd be another matter. So the paper has to be turned in. Now, how long would a research paper be in a graduate level course? That all depends. I've written papers as little as 10 to 12 pages, New Times Roman or Times New Roman, 12 points, double spaced, 8.5 by 11 sheets, 10 to 12 pages, anywhere from that small amount up to 50 to 60 pages. And these are term papers. Now, that may annoy my professor because they have to read all of that. But when I got interested in the subject, I wanted to go the extra mile sometimes and do some additional research. That's what I did in some cases. But generally speaking, I would say, anywhere from 12 to maybe 20 pages, 12 to 18 pages, following the proper format as we will discuss them in future sessions. So those are you'll have reading assignments of voluminous reading, and then a writing assignment, and then finally exams. I'll be honest, I think one of the reasons why it has been a little bit more difficult for me in this semester to get in sync with the program and the things that I stated I wanted to do in the syllabus and the schedule I wanted to follow has been that we don't have exams. I don't know, maybe it helps the professor just as much as it helps the students to have those deadlines, certain dates at which you will be tested. We didn't do that this time. We didn't require any, and perhaps we were remiss, perhaps I was remiss for not requiring any kind of tests to be taken this time, because they help you to study. Tests or exams usually help the professor to find out where the students are. If I see that all the students are missing the same questions, then perhaps I didn't teach very well in that area, and I can go back and shore up that area that is weak. If I see that some excel in certain areas than others, maybe I can enhance that and teach more in that area. And I find out where you are. It is a way for me to evaluate your progress. And it seems to me that that's just what has to be done as a rule. Now, this is a special kind of course. It's an orientation course. It's an introduction course. It isn't as though we were studying church history or philosophy of religion. But in the average course you take, you will have exams, reading assignments, and of course, now in my case, if you've been in any of my other classes, I ask you to keep a notebook as well. And I forgot how many years I've been doing that. I learned that a long time ago from another professor, and it was a good way for you to keep up with the materials you receive, to keep a note, and to keep up with your own notes. And I'm assuming, again, you're writing notes. So that's what you can expect in a typical graduate course for any particular theological school. Now, next time we'll look at, in the week of October the 21st, theological kinds of courses, and then the following session we'll deal with practical courses. What I'm going to do there is just kind of give you an overview of what these types of courses deal with. I'll look at some of these catalogs I have and some others and give you an idea of the sorts of things that are studied and what you can expect to study in those courses. So thank you very much for your kind attention this time.